What? I want to be a woman. What? It's my right as a man.
Hey everyone, it's Celine. So it's been a week since Tickle Vs Giggle, so I thought I'd make a little video about it, just a breakdown of the case, get you guys up to speed, because there's still a lot of people that have their heads buried in the sand over this case, and some of the details of what went down inside the courthouse were amusing to say the least. Alrighty, so firstly, I want to introduce you to Sall Grover. Sall Grover is an Australian businesswoman, and she's the creator of the Giggle for Girls app. She invented the app after returning home to Australia. She was living in America as a screenwriter. She was living in Hollywood during the infamous Me Too era, which she's been quoted as saying is as bad as it seems. She attended therapy, and her therapist asked her if she had a strong female network. Now, as someone who's been in therapy myself and has asked that, like I've had that same question asked to me, yeah, it was a no. So after having chats with her mum, they came up with the idea of, well, let's just invent one. Let's make one so every young woman knows that she has a strong female network in the palm of her hand. Brilliant idea. The main premise of the app, obviously, is to be a strong female network. So the ideas were, freelance work, if you're looking for a roommate. They even had lesbian dating on there, just everything for women. They even allowed trans men on the app, so that's women who identify as men. The only prerequisite to being allowed on this app was to be a biological female. That's it. How they were going to achieve this was through the use of an AI. The AI would, you take a selfie with your phone, the AI would scan your face, specifically your bone structure, which, as we know, is one of those things that determines the differences between men and women. And they had it set to a 94% accuracy. Pretty much all women would get through, and they would have to boot the occasional bloke who would pass through the AI test. And they did that for that reason. They didn't want any women to have any trouble getting on the app. If it means they have to kick out a few men every now and again, then that's what they were prepared to do. And giggle also, just want to say, is a collective term, like a collective noun for a group of women. Hence the name Giggle for Girls, which I think is incredibly cute. And I only just figured that out while researching. All right, so we've got a small little background on Sall and the origin story for Giggle for Girls. Now I'd like to introduce you to Roxanne Tickle, otherwise known as Roxy Tickle. So Roxy Tickle is a transgender woman who lives in Lismore, New South Wales. So I came to realise pretty quickly while doing research for this video that Roxy is fairly popular in Roxy's hometown of Lismore. Fair few articles written on their local digital newspaper. And a few appearances on SBS too, which I found quite amusing. I'll play one of them for you here.
My name is Roxy Tickle. I'm a trans woman from Lismore, New South Wales. I play hockey for East Lismore Hockey Club. I am 52 years old. I'm 20 kilograms overweight. And I'm one of the people that the Save Women's Sport Bill is asking you to be worried about. I started transitioning about 4 or 5 years ago. I started gender-affirming hormones about 6 to 9 months after I started transitioning. The downside is that having a third of the testosterone of the average cisgender female, I have a smaller engine. My heart can't pump as much oxygen around my body. I think the Save Women's Sport Bill is based on fear and misunderstanding. It doesn't appear to be based on me, and yet it's going to affect me. I absolutely believe that I should be playing hockey in a women's team. I am a woman. End of story.
Dear Lord, the bloody state of him. Well, there you go. You heard it there. End of story. Woman. Okay. So, there's a small little introduction into Roxy Tickle. Now, Roxy has every right, I guess, to believe that Roxy is a woman. Roxy doesn't have the right to try and convince everyone else that Roxy is a woman. So as I mentioned before with the AI, Sall and her team did have the occasional man sneak through the AI, and it got pretty bad for them. Sall's quoted as saying a bad day would be up to about 500 removals. So yeah, it kept her and her team pretty busy. So when they removed a man off the app, it wasn't really an event for them, considering it was happening pretty regularly. So that exact thing happened to Roxy Tickle. So Roxy Tickle did get on the app and was using the app, but was later discovered by Sall and her team and rightfully booted off the app because it is a place for biological females, which Roxy is not. So Roxy didn't take too kindly to that and started emailing Sall. After I think it was the 8th reply, Roxy called Sall's personal number. Sall's quoted as saying that no other person that she's ever removed from the app has corresponded this much with, or tried to correspond this much with her. So when he called her personal number, she put the phone number into the Giggle database. Obviously, this comes up. So Sall trusted, her natural instinct and went, that's a man. Let me remove the man from my app, which is what she did. So Roxy didn't like that too much, and Roxy filed a complaint with the Human Rights Commission. So Roxy filed the complaint and then withdrew, and then filed it again after receiving a lovely grant connected to the University of New South Wales. Lovely. In order for Sall to have settled the case with the Human Rights Commission, Sall would have had to not only let Roxy on the app, let all men who identify as women on the app. She would have had to police the language used on the app as to not offend such delicate flowers as Roxy Tickle. And she would also have to attend mandatory sex and gender re-education training. She said no, not doing it. And so that's how we ended up here. That's how it ended up at the federal court. So just another reminder for those who might not be aware, in 2013, under the Julia Gillard administration, so Julia Gillard is Australia's first and only female Prime Minister. The irony of this is astonishing. Under her government in 2013, there were amendments made to the Sex Discrimination Act, and those amendments included pretty much removing the definitions of man and woman, and inserting gender identity. So gender identity is now a protected characteristic in Australian law. I actually went down there on day one, on the Tuesday the 9th of April, and to my surprise, but also to my delight, the courtroom was absolutely packed. So myself and a few of the other ladies that I was with, we couldn't get seating, which, that's fine. There was an overwhelming show of support there for Sall. A couple of Tickle's mates, but I won't go into that. So day one of the court proceedings mostly centred around whether or not they were going to use Helen Joyce as a witness. If you don't know who Helen Joyce is, I highly recommend looking her up. She is absolutely brilliant. She's one of my favourite women on this planet. The way she talks about these issues with sex and gender, and her organisation, sexmatters.org, they do absolutely amazing work. I can't talk Helen Joyce up high enough, honestly. But so Tickle's team were arguing that sex and gender are not binary and that they can change from one another, and pretty much that woman means woman if it's on your birth certificate. It's not a biological or chromosomal question. It's more of a psychological question. That was where Tickle's team were mainly coming from. They also mentioned the Tickle's team also mentioned women that have hysterectomies and attempted to use that argument to, she's still a woman, right? Even though she hasn't got that one. They tried that. They then had a debate over the definition of discrimination. So they were putting forth the argument that Roxy is a woman because Roxy's had all these procedures, and Roxy, and I quote, feels like a woman.
Let's go, girls.
They then go through the events of how the trans activists found Giggle and pretty much launched an attack against the app. So they were, going to Google reviews, anywhere where you could review, just trashing the app, doing what trans activists do best. And Sall said on the 8th of February 2020, she received 5,000 requests in one day to get on the app. So you could call it an attack. They attacked the app. And during the second attack of the app, Sall went into labour. And just for a bit of context, her daughter is now 2. So this has been going on a hot minute. So then they started talking about how all the social media attention has made Roxy feel. Pretty much going back and forth over that, over who blocked who first. And obviously, Roxy didn't take too kindly to being blocked. So they're arguing over whether, blocking is a form of discrimination, X, Y, and Z. They also went into a bit of background on Sall's merch that she, along with her team, are selling in order to raise funds for the case, because keep in mind, she has to raise every dollar herself. Meanwhile, old mate gets his grants and pro bono lawyers and all that good stuff. So yeah, Sall was making merch, her team was making merch to raise funds to fight this bloke. They ultimately decided that Helen Joyce, in the context of this case, couldn't be classified as an expert witness, even though she is most definitely an expert on the subject. So there was a lot of back and forth about that, and then ultimately the judge decided that her affidavit was akin to a lay person, which wouldn't hold much substance in the courtroom. So that was pretty much day one. Day two involved Sall getting up on the stand and being cross-examined, and oh my goodness, what an attempt to character assassinate from Tickle's team, I'll just say. Just pretty much going back and forward with her. They kept grilling her over the fact that she wouldn't call Roxy she. So Tickle's counsel argued, because Roxy's had all the work, would Sall call her Miss Tickle? Sall says, and this is a direct quote, "I don't think it's kind to expect women to see Miss Tickle as a woman." Facts. They kept grilling her for not being kind and all this other jazz, but it's like, where's the kindness for the women who have to look at this and go, yeah, love? Yeah. So Sall really, really held her own in the court. I can only imagine the pressure in that kind of environment. Tickle's team also misgendered him a fair few times, which I thought was a bit amusing, because your eyes don't lie. So that his lawyer would have had a very difficult time keeping a straight face over that one. And here we've got one of my favourite quotes from the trial. So Tickle's lawyer, Georgie, yeah, this lady. So she pretty much saying that even if someone is assigned male at birth, they've had genital, altercation surgery, whatever, took hormones, changed the name, electrolysis, facial recognition, shopped in the female section of Kmart, wears women's clothes, uses female change rooms, you don't accept that person is a woman towards Sall. And Sall, just one word, no. Mic drop, put it on a shirt. So yeah, so Tickle's team, as I said before, were arguing on the basis of my birth certificate says woman, therefore I am woman. But what they neglect to really think about is like, yeah, you can have everything done. You can have the whole everything done. You're not a woman. There's a conversation to be had of, whether you want to say trans woman or all that jazz, but it's definitely not woman. So then they go over more details about when Roxy joined, when Roxy was removed. Sall did respond to the very first email that Roxy did send. Sall was obviously under the impression that this was a woman that wasn't allowed on the app, so okay, let me go fix it. And then, yeah, Roxy Tickle called Sall's mobile, left some voice messages as well. Now, I don't give a shit. Like, I've seen people argue online like, oh, but the emails were polite. Okay. I don't speak for every young lady, but I'm willing to bet a lot of them have been in there, hey, hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? Just want to see how you're doing. Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? Hi. And then you get like a fuck you slut or something at the end of it because you don't reply. Like, just because something seems polite, the text is polite, we all know what that feeling is like, okay? So just putting that out there. Tickle's team argued that his emails and phone calls weren't harassment. He was just being nice. Again. It's just, yes, context matters. And I just don't think a reasonable person, after receiving no replies, straight to the personal number. Make of that what you will. Maybe Roxy's just impatient. Then they go over the names of investors for Giggle. Sall talks about the people that have invested. Pretty much trying to frame Sall as inventing Giggle purely for the profit kind of thing, which obviously isn't the case. The money would have just been a massive added bonus. So, and now we get to, without a doubt, the best moment in the court. The best moment out of the entire case. But before we get there, I've got to show you this tiny little video of Mr. Tickle on SBS and his feelings towards male change rooms.
For being here. Roxy, you're a transgender woman from regional New South Wales. You played hockey for 10 years from when you were 16 years old, but you stopped when you were 26. Why?
Something didn't feel quite right, and it has taken me decades longer to look back and try and dissect that and understand that I really didn't like being in the male changing rooms. I felt really uncomfortable there. I didn't like the smells or the sounds.
You stopped playing hockey for almost 2 decades. What was that period for you?
Fellas, do any of you, love the smell of the male change rooms? I can't with this. Here we see Roxy Tickle saying that one of the reasons that Roxy is a trans person is because Roxy couldn't stand the smell inside a male change room. Now, Sall and her absolutely brilliant team took that and ran with it, and they made these candles here. Sweaty balls, team giggle, all the way. So funny. So objectively funny. So they bring this up in the court, right? And they get, Sal's on the stand and they're getting her to go through the paperwork. They're trying to make Sall out to be an absolute monster for sharing all of these awful products all over Twitter. She wouldn't have had to do any of this if it wasn't for Roxy Tickle, but anyway. So they put it to Sall, and she's flipping through, and they go, okay, we'll get you to look at, page whatever it was. She turns out, and it's the candle. She giggled. The CEO of Giggle giggled in the courtroom. You can't write it. It's so good. And apparently she went, and Tickle's counsel said, "Are you giggling, Miss Grover?" It's amazing. So they go through the merch, whether it's offensive or not. So funny. Roxy was incredibly upset by all these Twitter posts. Keep in mind that Sall blocked Roxy fairly early on, incredibly early on in this whole saga. So how was Roxy seeing all these mean, hurtful tweets? Pretty sure his counsel go on to say that he did have other accounts. He had sock accounts. He's a very stable person. Just grilling Sall more over all the media appearances that she's done about this. None of our media in Australia would talk to this woman. I'm talking Channel 9, Channel 7, Channel 10, ABC, SBS, pick. None of them. Silence. So yeah, she's had to go overseas and speak about this case, because how else is she going to raise $500,000? Tickle's lawyer also called Sall Miss Tickle a few times, misgendering her own client, and wild. Yeah, so they were just painting Sall out to be someone who's going overseas and schmoozing and dining on all the money she's made from Giggle, when in reality she's got barely nothing to her name now with all this bullshit. So after lunch on day 2, it was time for the Human Rights Commission to have their counsel present and to give their statements as a friend of the court, or whatever you call it. I saw a lot of live tweets from the women who were in the courtroom during this, and as funny as it is surface level, it's really quite heartbreaking that in 2024 we have the Australian Human Rights Commission genuinely arguing that sex is different to gender, all of those bullshit arguments. Sex isn't defined in the Sex Discrimination Act as well. They mentioned this. So they listed relevant sections of the Act. They cited a few marriage cases, I believe, in the past. Yeah, direct quote is, so suggests sex is assigned at birth and that it can be changed over time, because keep in mind, according to these people, if your birth certificate says it, then it must be true, and you can alter a birth certificate, as we've seen. Just more back and forth over the bullshit legislation, because obviously this is the first case where this legislation is being put to the test, and they apparently discovered in real time just how many holes there are in this legislation and how many definitions just don't exist anymore. So it would have been a very unbearable part to listen to. And keep in mind that most of the people in this courtroom were women. So to hear them argue against their own biology would have been very, very intriguing. So day 3 was mostly centered around what constitutes harassment. in this claim, whether it's indirect, direct, primary, secondary. Tickle's team are arguing that the first discrimination was the refusal to respond to the emails, and the second was obviously Roxy Tickle being excluded from the app. They were saying that it was discrimination because Giggle app had no distinction between trans women and men. It's because trans women are men. More affidavits from lesbians wanting women-only spaces excluding trans women, understandably. More back and forth about definitions, what things mean, and then Tickle's counsel submitted that they were looking for $200,000 in damages because Roxy had become suicidal due to the whole ordeal. Just how damaging it must be. So yeah, they're asking for $200,000 because of sustained misgendering over the past 3 years, because according to some media outlets, Sall has run a hate campaign against this trans woman. He's suing her. She is doing what she can do to raise funds to defend herself. Again, it should come as no surprise the way the media has obviously only just started to report on it, considering it just happened. Leading up until that, absolute silence. But when they do, this is what we get. It's bullshit. One thing I definitely want to read out and show you is an absolute mic drop boss bitch moment from Sall's counsel, Bridie Nolan. So she said this in response to Tickle's team arguing that he is a woman psychologically. What is a woman if thinking one is a woman means one is a woman? A woman is not a thought. The applicant's lawyer's summation of a woman is not only deeply offensive but absurd. How one dresses, where one shops, etc. Like, they did, just side note, the Kmart, shopping in the Kmart was a genuine argument from Tickle's side. Like, my client shops in the female section of Kmart, therefore, woman. I can't tell you, I used to live in the male section of JJ's as a teenager. I rarely brought clothes from the women's side in JJ's. I used to live in JJ's and it was always the dude's clothing. Does that make me ridiculous? Okay, anyway. Both sexes can go shop on the opposite side of the aisle. The more troubling and insidious aspect of the applicant's evidence is that there is this entitlement to access spaces where the female sex go, proving incontrovertibly that the applicant does not have the psychology of a woman. Our society recognises the importance of single-sex spaces in certain circumstances, female-only toilets, dormitories, etc., to keep women safe from male violence. These are the very places that the applicant says he goes. When a woman who is biologically born, and always so, whether she has had her reproductive organs removed or not, whether she thinks she is a male or not, walks through a dark park in the middle of the night, she doesn't stop to think, I wonder what side of Kmart this person shops on. Have they had their facial hair removed? Have they told people in the workplace whether they're a woman or not? She doesn't do that. She doesn't stop for 1 second to do that. She senses instinctively what she perceives to be a threat. She tightens her fingers around her keys. She speeds up. If a man truly had the psychology of a woman, he would know that and not enter the female-only spaces. This proves the applicant lacks the psychology of a woman, that the applicant is not a woman. Holy shit. She said it. Closing arguments were centered around the fact that, Roxy repeatedly emailed Sall and intimidated her. Sall's just trying to raise money to defend herself, to keep her app women only as she intended. And yeah, just an absolute bloody waste of time, if you ask me. The alphabet mafia, the LGBTQI plus Wi-Fi password community have so many dedicated spaces. So many. And women can't have one? One? Come on. So even though the proceedings ended on Thursday, myself and a bunch of other bigots decided to meet outside the Federal Court of Sydney, and we said a few words to hopefully try and, nudge them in the right direction of this case. So it is very highly likely that the case will go to the High Court. That's because Sall's not backing down, pretty clearly. Safe to say, probably Roxy T ain't going to back down either.
Let's go, girl.
Considering he's got such lovely, supportive friends, including old mate Teddy here, which you might recognise as the person that Billboard Chris called out. And our e-safety commissioner is now going after X and Elon for all that jazz. And Teddy's got Teddy's claws in a lot of Australian higher-ups, I guess you could say. So that's just the rundown of the case. Woman creates woman-only app. Man tries to get on app. Woman says no. Man takes woman to court. Is a pretty summed up version of it. Sall is absolutely amazing. A really nice, down-to-earth woman who had no idea what gender ideology and pronouns and trans activists and all this shit were like 4 years ago. The result probably won't be, I've read whispers, probably not until August. We're here with you, Sall, all the way. What you do is incredibly important. What you have done is incredibly important. Sacrificing as much time away from your child as you have, I will be sure that my daughter knows your name. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. Yeah, take care.
It is symbolic of our struggle against oppression. Symbolic of his struggle against reality.